Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are plunging into an album that's, well, it's less a collection of songs and more like a meticulously engineered philosophical universe. We're talking about Tool's 2001 masterpiece, Lateralus.
Mm-hmm. And it's absolutely recognized globally, isn't it? A real landmark in progressive metal, just known for being incredibly dense, both intellectually and sonically.
Right. But, for a lot of listeners, the conversation around Lateralus tends to circle back to maybe two really fascinating but maybe surface level things.
Yeah, you mean the famous stuff,
Yeah.
like the time signature sequence in the title track, that spiraling thing,
Yeah.
and the Fibonacci syllable count in the vocals.
Exactly. And those are amazing observations, absolutely. But maybe they risk simplifying what's actually going on underneath, like this towering compositional achievement.
I think that's a fair point. They're hooks, really good ones, but they don't capture the full picture.
Right. So our mission today, well, it's to really dig deeper.
Yeah.
To conduct a systematic compositional analysis that goes way beyond just those anecdotes. We're going to try a deep track-by-track exploration.
Okay.
And the idea is to show that the music of Lateralus isn't just complex for complexity's sake. It's actually, governed by a unified system. Algorithm, rhythmic design, proportional design. It's all connected. The complexity is the method, you could say.
And that's the core argument, really.
Yeah.
That Lateralus stands out, even today, as a masterpiece of 21st century progressive composition, precisely because of that systematic approach. You've got these odd meters, polymeter structures pulled from Fibonacci, the golden ratio.
Right.
And it all creates this non-traditional but incredibly cohesive formal structure. And crucially, this sonic geometry, it isn't just abstract math. It mirrors and really empowers the album's central themes. The big ideas about spiritual self-discovery.
Jungian stuff, Hermetic philosophy.
Exactly. Those kinds of things. So the music isn't just illustrating the philosophy. In a way, the music is the philosophy, embodied in sound.
Okay, so to tackle this, because it's a big topic, we're going to try and focus on three main areas, three analytical domains. First up, the rhythmic engine. That's the genius of the drumming, the metric design, all that algorithmic stuff.
The foundation.
Yeah. Then second, we'll look at the mathematical blueprint, how that governs the big picture, the large-scale form, the proportions.
The architecture.
And finally, we'll explore the harmonic and tonal language, how they create that signature atmosphere, and how the math connects to the cosmology of it all.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that rhythmic engine, the part that really drives the whole process.
Right. So when we talk about the rhythmic architecture of Tool, you almost have to slip the usual roles in your head. The drummer, Carey, he's not just providing accompaniment,
He's not just keeping time.
Far from it. He is often the primary structural determinant of the music. His approach feels fundamentally algorithmic. He sets up these complex rhythmic cycles, often really non-standard ones, and then they get maintained, layered, shifted in these highly controlled ways. That literally dictates the form of the song.
I think a lot of people listening feel that complexity, right? But maybe don't have the vocabulary for it. What stops it all from just becoming noise? How does it hold together?
Well, that's where the precision comes in. It's algorithmic, systematic. Carey anchors the complexity using systems like additive meter. Let's take the Grudge as the first example. Yeah. It kicks off the album and immediately establishes this complex rhythmic language.
Okay.
In most, say, mainstream rock, meter is just divisional. Four is just 2 + 2, simple division. But in the Grudge, especially in those heavy verse sections, the structure is built on these additive metric groups. You often hear these rapid 5/8 sections or even 10/8 sometimes.
Okay, so additive grouping. Help us visualize that. It means you're not thinking of equal beats, but combining smaller chunks. Like uneven pulses.
Exactly right. So a bar of 5/8 isn't just 5 equal eighth notes. It's felt as, say, 3/8 notes followed by 2/8 notes, or maybe the other way around, 2 + 3. What this does musically is generate these incredibly propulsive phrases that don't feel square. They don't resolve neatly.
They keep pushing you forward or pulling back.
Precisely. If you listen closely to the Grudge, those verses often use these long phrases that combine these groups, maybe something like 11/8. Structured as, I don't know, maybe 3 + 3 + 2 + 3 eighth notes. Your brain keeps trying to latch onto a simple 4-bar phrase, a resting point, but it's constantly being pulled or held by these uneven groupings. That friction, that tension, it's completely intentional.
And that feeling, that sort of defying expectation, it's amplified by something called metric displacement. You mentioned that's another tool they use.
Yes, absolutely. Metric displacement is subtle, but really effective.
Hmm.
It happens when the underlying rhythmic cycle, the main pulse, stays constant, but Carey deliberately shifts where the accents fall, or where the implied downbeat feels like it should be. He might shift it by just a single subdivision, like a 16th note.
So it throws you off balance a bit.
It does. The heavy main riff in the Grudge is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Let's say the overall meter is a steady 5. You instinctively expect, maybe, the snare hit to land strongly on beat 2 or 4, but he might subtly delay it or anticipate it. The accents fall on beats that feel weird, unexpected. It creates that characteristic Tool feeling, that lurching or staggering quality. It's completely unsettling and essential to their style. It's like walking upstairs where every so often one step is just slightly higher or lower than you expect.
That deliberate instability, that's really cranked up when we get to Schism, isn't it? That's the one famous for just constantly shifting time signatures.
Oh, Schism is like a rhythmic laboratory. It's almost an exhaustive catalog of odd meters. You've got 5/8, 7/8, 6/8, 3/8, and they shift constantly, sometimes every bar, sometimes even within a single bar.
Wow.
But the really key analytical point here, the important distinction, is that it's not just metric shifting back and forth, it's often polymetric conflict.
Okay, can you break that down? What's the difference between just shifting meters and this polymetric conflict?
So polymeter means you're using different meters at the same time across different instruments. So while the overall time signature on the sheet music might say 5/8, if you actually analyze what each instrument is doing in Schism, you find they're often implying different additive groupings simultaneously.
Oh, okay.
For instance, in a bar of 5/8, maybe the guitar and bass are strongly implying a 3+2 grouping. You feel that kind of short, long pulse. But at the same time, Danny Carey on the drums might be layering a really consistent 2+3 pattern, pushing the beat in the opposite direction rhythmically.
So the instruments are kind of arguing about where the one is, where the downbeat should land.
That's a great way to put it. Precisely. It creates this relentless, sort of unresolving rhythmic dialogue. The parts are constantly fighting for dominance, rhythmically speaking. They never fully lock into a comfortable, predictable groove.
Which ties into the lyrics.
Perfectly. It embodies that lyrical theme of separation, duality, things falling apart. I know the pieces fit because I watch them fall away. The music itself is giving you that feeling of conflict, of failed communication. It's a brilliant rhythmic metaphor.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to ticks and leeches. That one is just known for sheer aggression, right? Textural extremes. How does rhythm play into that catharsis?
Right, ticks and leeches really uses rhythmic complexity to achieve this overwhelming sense of textural release. It mirrors those really difficult stages in, say, alchemy or psychological transformation. The song slams between sections of extreme density and these really slow, almost drone-like parts. In those dense, aggressive sections, Carey's drumming just goes into overdrive. He's playing these incredibly complex subdivisions that feel almost impossible to count or track consciously.
Those really fast parts, I always feel like the song is speeding up, but maybe it isn't. It creates an illusion of acceleration.
It absolutely does. And that's often achieved through Carey's use of rapid, complex subdivisions. Things like quintuplets, that's 5 notes squeezed into the space of 1 beat, or septuplets, 7 notes per beat. These create an implied speed, a metric velocity, that feels way faster than the actual underlying tempo.
Okay.
And when the whole band locks into what feels like a new, faster tempo, they're often using a really sophisticated technique called metric modulation.
Now, if they just wanted to speed up, why not just speed up, gradually increase the tempo? What does the math, the precision of metric modulation, actually add to the feeling?
That's the crucial difference. Just speeding up can feel chaotic, maybe a bit uncontrolled, like losing the reins. Metric modulation is different because it establishes a very precise mathematical relationship between the duration of the old beat unit and the new beat unit.
How does that work?
For instance, maybe the duration of an 8th note triplet in the slow section becomes the exact duration of the new quarter note in the fast section. It's a mathematical link. This maintains a kind of rigid internal coherence, even while achieving these sudden but totally controlled bursts of acceleration or deceleration.
So you feel the speed shift, but you also sense, maybe subconsciously, that the underlying grid hasn't just broken down, it's transformed.
Exactly. It gives the song this kind of overwhelming kinetic intensity. It feels almost mechanical, like machine-like rage. And that serves as the perfect musical language for that feeling of cathartic purging, of letting it all out. The rhythmic instability in ticks and leeches isn't chaos. It feels like controlled, systematic destruction. Engineered, to mirror that process of psychological collapse and eventually rebuilding.
Okay, so I've got the foundation laid. These
Uh-huh.
rhythms are systematic, they're algorithmic. Now let's move up a level to part two and see how those algorithms start to shape the bigger picture, the macro form. And we have to start with the absolute centerpiece, conceptually and formally, the title track, Lateralus.
Yes, Lateralus is really where Tool puts the proportional design front and center, using it to govern the actual shape of the song. We need to revisit those famous observations, the rhythm, the vocals, but look at them now in terms of their structural function.
Right, the rhythmic sequence in the chorus. It's famously 9/8, then 8, then 8/8, then 7/8.
hmm And that sequence, 987, well, that's immediately recognizable as the 16th Fibonacci number, 987. Okay, cool fact. But the real compositional stroke of genius, I think, is in the vocal line during the verses. Maynard James Keenan's syllables. They follow the Fibonacci sequence ascending and then descending.
1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, then back down. 5, 3.
Exactly. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 5, 3.
Now, that's an incredible level of self-imposed constraint, right? As a composer, why box yourself in like that? Why does the math matter beyond just being, a neat trick? What does it do?
Well, it acts as this powerful formal driver. This numerical text setting literally forces the rhythm of the vocal line to push against and then eventually kind of coalesce with the band's underlying metric framework. Think about the energy. The increasing length of the phrases as you ascend up to the 8 syllables. It builds incredible momentum, rhetorical momentum, emotional momentum. It pulls the listener forward.
And then the descent.
And then the descent, 8-5-3, provides this momentary sense of relaxation, a kind of contemplative release. It perfectly mirrors that lyrical idea of the spiral inward, and it connects the personal journey to this sense of nature's inherent mathematical order.
So the Fibonacci sequence isn't just window dressing. It literally dictates the energy curve, the sort of rhetorical weight of the whole verse section. But the math goes bigger than that, right? It governs the entire structure of the song through the golden section.
Correct. The golden ratio, or phi, symbolized by the Greek letter psi fac, roughly 0.618. It has a long history in art and architecture, and composers like Debussy, Bartók, they've used it as an architectural marker, a point of formal climax or significant transition that feels, well, mathematically perfect or balanced. And we can apply this rigorously to the total length of Lateralus.
Okay, the track time is 9 minutes and 24 seconds, which is, what, 564 seconds total?
Right. And if we calculate the golden section point, that moment of ideal formal balance, we take the total duration, 564 seconds, and multiply by 5.618.
Yep.
And that gives you approximately 348 seconds, which translates precisely to 5 minutes and 48 seconds into the song. That's the calculated pivot point based on the golden ratio.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. What actually happens in the music at exactly 5.48?
It's uncanny. That moment, 5.48, coincides exactly with the transition point. It's where the final, really dense, rhythmically complex chorus section, the climax, ends, and it shifts into that completely ambient, sustained, almost floating guitar solo section. It is the architectural pivot of the entire piece.
Wow. So the golden section isn't just a coincidence. It's used deliberately as the marker for the album's thematic peak, the point where all that rhythmic and vocal struggle resolves into this purely instrumental, kind of soaring, transcendent release, symbolizing maybe achieving that lateral thinking, integrating the self, all those ideas. The complexity of the first 6 minutes finds its resolution at this mathematically perfect moment.
That's exactly how it feels, and the map backs it up.
Yeah.
It confirms that the complexity is entirely intentional, deeply structural. The mathematics dictates the narrative arc of the song. And this idea, this proportional structuring, it carries right through to the very end of the album.
You mean the last 3 tracks?
Yeah, the final 3 tracks, Disposition, Reflection, and Triad, they really feel designed to function as one single cohesive unit. It's like a 26-minute formal structure in itself, mirroring those final stages of the spiritual journey, the rubido stage in alchemy, the completion. They deliberately kind of dissolve the traditional boundaries between songs.
Let's zoom in on Reflection, because that seems like the rhythmic and conceptual core of that final section.
Reflection is just a masterclass in polyrhythmic layering and sustained introspection. The whole groove is built on this incredibly complex interplay. You've got 5-beat cycles and 7-beat cycles constantly weaving around each other. It sustains this rhythmic duality.
Back to duality again.
Always back to duality.
Yeah.
And it perfectly embodies those lyrical themes of contemplation, looking inward, integrating the selves-opposing parts. There's a feeling of floating, but within this very controlled, incredibly dense rhythmic space.
And the really striking compositional element there, the thing that anchors all that complexity, is the introduction of tabla drumming, right?
Yes. Danny Carey brings in electronic or maybe acoustic table percussion. And this introduces a completely separate rhythmic stream, one that's highly subdivided, very intricate. So while the main kit, the guitar, the bass, are navigating these larger shifting meters, the 5s and the 7s, the tabla acts as this hypnotic anchor.
Like a pedal point, but rhythmic.
Exactly, a rhythmic pedal point. It anchors the piece with this stable, constant, rapidly repeating pulse underneath everything else. It prevents the whole structure from just drifting off into space. This incredibly dense rhythmic fabric becomes the musical embodiment of unification, of realizing those infinite possibilities the album talks about. It's like seeing rhythm on a micro level, constantly cycling within the larger macro structure.
Okay, so we've dug deep into the rhythmic complexity, the algorithms, and how that shapes the macro form using things like Fibonacci and the golden ratio. Now, part 3, we need to talk about the feel, the atmosphere. Because for music, this structurally demanding to actually hit you emotionally, it needs a really distinctive sonic world. And a lot of that comes from Tool's unique harmonic choices, right?
Absolutely. Tool's harmonic language is, I think, crucial to the album's emotional weight. And its defining trait is this aesthetic of deliberate ambiguity. It actively, almost pointedly, avoids traditional functional harmony.
You mean that standard tension and release? Like dominant chord resolving to the tonic chord, the feeling of coming home harmonically?
Exactly that. That comfortable VI cadence that drives so much Western music. Tool largely throws that playbook out.
They just refuse to give you that easy resolution, that clear destination. How do they achieve that, technically speaking?
Well, primarily through the guitar work of Adam Jones. He relies almost exclusively on power chords, just the root and the fifth, sometimes called 5 chords. Now, this isn't just about sounding heavy. It's a deliberate and compositionally really potent choice.
Why is leaving out that one note, the third, so significant?
Because the third of the chord is what tells your ear whether the chord is major, happy sounding generally, or minor, sad sounding generally. By eliminating the third, Jones strips away that fundamental major-minor distinction.
Ah, so they remove the most obvious emotional signifier in the chord.
Precisely. The music becomes intensely heavy, yes, because of the distortion, the low tuning, all that, but it also remains tonally flexible. It hovers in this kind of ambiguous emotional space. It's not clearly happy, not clearly sad. It's just intense.
And that flexibility must be necessary for those long, sprawling structures we talked about.
It's absolutely necessary. It allows them to sustain these long sections, these massive structural expansions, without the listener feeling constantly pushed towards predictable harmonic resolutions. It creates a sense of vastness, of suspension.
So if they're not using that dominant tonic pull, how do the chords relate to each other? How does the harmony move?
The movement becomes what we call non-functional. It's dictated more by things like scalar parallelism, just moving the same chord shape up or down the scale, or by the linear movement of the bass line underneath. Take a track like The Patient.
Right.
The main riff might move through power chords like D5, down to C5, maybe up to G5, back to D5. These movements are often by step, or maybe by a minor third. They deliberately avoid that strong pullback to a home bass, that feeling of tonic resolution. This kind of suspended harmonic tension musically represents that theme of endurance, of waiting, right? The feeling of being stuck, perhaps, in this vast, unchanging psychological landscape.
And this harmonic ambiguity, this flexibility, it allows them to really lean into using different modes, doesn't it? To color the emotional narrative as the album journeys through those stages of transformation. What are the key modes we hear on Lateralus?
Well, the two modes that really define the album's characteristic color, I'd say, are Dorian and Aeolian. The Dorian mode is probably the most signature sound of the album. It's essentially a minor scale, but with a raised 6th degree. Often they anchor it on D. So if D is your center, the B natural, that raised 6th, creates this really unique, poignant tension against the D minor feel.
Can you describe what that sounds like, that Dorian quality? What feeling does it evoke?
It gives this sort of fleeting, introspective quality within the overall darkness. It's minor, so it reflects the struggle, the difficulty. But that raised 6th, it offers just a hint of something else. Maybe optimism, Maybe intellectual curiosity, a sense of seeking. It feels like climbing, a long, dark spiral staircase.
Yeah.
But every so often, there's a small window, letting in a sliver of light.
Oh.
It perfectly reflects that internal struggle towards enlightenment. There's hope contained within the darkness.
And the other mode, Aeolian.
Right, Aeolian mode. That's just the natural minor scale.
Yeah.
And Tool tends to reserve this for the album's darkest, most aggressive passages. Think about the Grudge, or the really heavy parts of Ticks and Leeches. They lean heavily on Aeolian. This mode doesn't offer that mitigating raised sixth, that hint of optimism. It provides the raw, unadulterated sound for rage, for psychological turmoil, for confronting the shadow.
So it's harmonically bleak.
Exactly. Structurally dense, harmonically bleak. It's the perfect compositional tool for expressing those really difficult alchemical stages like calcination, putrefaction, the burning away, the decay.
We absolutely have to spend some time on Justin Chancellor's bass playing here because you can argue the bass is the most melodically active voice outside of the vocals and maybe compositionally just as critical as the drums in some ways.
Oh, completely agree. Chancellor's bass work is absolutely instrumental, pun intended, in creating the album's unique texture. It's often functioning not just as a harmonic foundation, but as a true rhythmic and melodic counterpoint. It engages in this active dialogue with the guitar and drums.
What are some key techniques he uses?
Well, the first thing to notice is the extensive use of the drone, or the pedal point.
That's the sustained low note that just sits there under everything else.
Yeah. Tracks like The Patient, for example, rely heavily on this sustained low note, often a D, in the bass. This anchors the music firmly in a specific tonal region. It creates this profound sense of stasis, of monumentality. It's the sound of vastness, like you said earlier, staring at a landscape that feels unchanging, overwhelming.
And that provides stability.
It provides the necessary stability for the other instruments, the guitar, the drums, to go off on those complex, shifting rhythmic explorations we talked about earlier. The drone holds it all together. But beyond the drone, Chancellor's bass lines are often incredibly melodic and employ these short, really recognizable motifs. Think of those signature bass riffs in Schism or The Patient. And crucially, these motifs are often transposed in unexpected ways.
How so?
He often uses root motion by, say, a minor third, or sometimes even the really unsettling tritone interval. These aren't the predictable VI or IVI movements. These non-traditional root movements transform the bass line from just marking the chords into this powerful, active narrative voice of its own.
So the bass is almost guiding you through the emotional landscape, while the guitar is providing the heavy texture, and the drums are building the algorithmic structure.
That's a really good summary. Exactly. And think back to Schism, the way the bass line is phrased in those odd meters, often really emphasizing that 3+2 grouping against the drums 2+3 feel.
Yeah.
It makes the bass the absolute central axis of that polymetric conflict. Chancellor's bass work ensures that the harmonic landscape, the landscape of the struggle, is built on this contrapuntal movement and this intentional ambiguity. It really demands a more active, analytical kind of listening from you.
Okay, so we've really taken the machine apart, haven't we? We've looked at the rhythmic engine, the proportional architecture, the ambiguous harmony. Now, part 4, let's put it all back together. How does all this meticulous, rigorous, compositional structure actually serve as a literal sonic manifestation of those big philosophical and psychological themes woven through the album?
Right, this is where it all clicks. The music isn't just about Jungian psychology, the process of individuation or Hermetic principles. The music is a sonic blueprint of those ideas. The complexity isn't random noise. The complexity is the narrative itself expressed in sound.
Okay, let's start with one of those Hermetic ideas, the law of rhythm. The principle basically states, everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, rhythm compensates. How does the music do that?
Tool uses that metric algorithmicism we talked about to make this principle audible, tangible. Think back to the title track, Lateralus, with that rapid alternation of expanding and contracting time signatures, 9/8, then 8/8, then 7/8.
The ebb and flow.
Exactly. And the pervasive use of those additive meters, like the 2+3 fight against the 3+2 groupings in the Grudge, these are precise musical equivalents of that Hermetic flow and ebb. The structures are deliberately designed to feel inherently unstable, always flowing, always compensating, specifically to avoid stasis, because stasis is the opposite of the spiral journey, the opposite of growth.
And that constant polymeter we kept finding, particularly in Schism, does that relate to another principle, like the law of polarity?
Absolutely. That rhythmic duality where the bass and guitar are implying different meters or different groupings at the same time, that is the sonic equivalent of the Hermetic law of polarity. everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites.
Hmm.
And notice, Tool doesn't usually force a simple, easy, immediate resolution to that duality. They embrace the opposing forces. They find the intensity, the beauty, and the dissonance in the conflict. Just like in Jungian terms, the self has to acknowledge and integrate its own dualities, its own opposites, to achieve wholeness. The conflict is presented as necessary for the eventual transcendence.
And we can actually track the stages of Jungian individuation through the album structure as well, can't we? Like the initial confrontation with the shadow archetype that's supposed to be difficult, painful, maybe chaotic.
And musically, tracks like the Grudge, Ticks and Leeches, they embody that struggle perfectly. They're structurally dense, incredibly complex. They're rhythmically abrasive. Remember the metric displacement, the polymeter? And they're harmonically dark, leaning heavily on that bleak Aeolian mode. These musical choices directly mirror that difficult, painful confrontation with the shadow that, according to Jung, initiates the whole journey of self-discovery. The composition feels contorted and complex because the psychological process is contorted and complex.
And then, contrasting that, we get to that moment of integration, the breakthrough, which you identified as being marked by the golden section in Lateralus.
Yes. That structural use of the golden section feels like the pivotal turning point. It's the moment of alchemical perfection, you could say, the rubido, the reddening, the completion. By placing that major formal climax, the shift from intense struggle to that soaring, ambient instrumental release at that precise proportional point, 5.48, well, the compositional choice perfectly aligns mathematical perfection with the psychological goal of achieving the integrated, unified self. The complex structure finds its elegant resolution not through some external force coming in, but through its own inherent mathematical design.
So what does this all mean then? It sounds like you're saying the architecture is the narrative.
In a very real sense, yes. It means the music and the philosophy aren't just related. They are structurally inseparable. The immense complexity isn't arbitrary. It's not just showing off. It is the deliberate, calculated, and I would argue incredibly successful musical expression of this overarching philosophical system. The structure is the meaning. The journey itself requires this specific, intricate geometry to even be comprehensible, let alone undertaken.
So this deep dive, we set out to move beyond just appreciating the cool facts about Lateralus, the anecdotes, and really try to present a systematic compositional analysis. And I think we've established that the algorithmic rhythms, the mathematically derived proportional forms, that intentional harmonic ambiguity, it all works together as this unified system to express these really profound themes about the journey of self-discovery.
And it highlights how the systematic use of constraint, in this case, mathematics, complex rhythms, isn't limiting creativity. It's actually what leads to these unique and incredibly powerful artistic forms. The rules enable the expression.
No, we do have to acknowledge the irony here, don't we, before we wrap up? The chorus of Lateralus itself has that famous line, overthinking, overanalyzing separates the body from the mind.
Right. And we've just spent quite a bit of time doing exactly that, rigorously analyzing the geometric laws underpinning the work. It's a fair point.
But does applying this kind of rigorous analysis actually destroy the mystery of the spiral, or does it do something else?
I'd argue it does something else entirely. I don't think it destroys the mystery. Instead, it reveals the precise laws of its creation. For Tool, it seems, understanding the geometry of the composition, the intricate rules they set for themselves, is the closest the music can get to actually revealing the geometry of the universe itself. This album makes a powerful, detailed case for composition as a form of cosmology.
That's a fascinating way to put it. Composition as cosmology.
So if you go back and revisit the album after hearing this, maybe listen with this framework in mind. We'd encourage you to listen specifically for maybe two key things. First, really try to locate that rhythmic conflict in the main riff of Schism. Listen for how the bass and guitar seem to be fighting over the downbeat in that 5/8 meter. Try to hear the sound of duality in action. And second, pay really close attention to that exact moment at 5 minutes and 48 seconds in the title track Lateralis. Feel how that point functions as the architectural peak, the moment where all that rhythmic struggle seems to resolve into that transcendent soaring instrumental release. That's the sound of integration, mathematically placed,